Alright, everybody sit down and be quiet, because I got a lot of explaining to do and it's gonna take some time. Boo! Who said that? Who the heck said that? Samuel Barber Orchestral Works Volume 1 is a modest release of Barber's works. Not exactly a CD that jumps out at you. I mean, heck, none of them do. Every classical Naxos release looks like something you find hanging up in a hotel bathroom. But I kid the good people of Naxos. Where would we be as a civilization without their classical album equivalent of the 50-cent comic book? Which is the real tragedy, isn't it? They're cost-effective, but never time-effective. Part of the fun, and part of the hindrance to classical music, is that you're constantly taking shots in the dark. In fact, that's probably more of a hindrance to any kind of fun. I mean, what kind of freaking lunatic would find fun from that? I mean, you'd have to be really crazy.
In any case, I'm not sure what any of this has to do with Samuel Barber, Seth.
Me neither. Barber's work isn't exactly a pivotal example as to the lack of investment in classical music. Then again, maybe he kind of is. Romantic music, which Barber is usually classified in, is often thought of as the most approachable genre of original classical work for its strong emphasis on feelings. So when one pops in Barber, listeners probably expect to get it on some level, and when they don't, well, it's very tempting to throw it out a window or bash it with a hammer. There isn't really anything too hard to understand about the works on this album. Compared to some other stuff, it's fairly easy. So if he's so approachable and so important, why the heck haven't I heard his name? I mean, Samuel Barber probably does hold a strange occupancy within the realm of American history. I mean, people call him one of the most famous, iconic, and respected people of American music, and I'm pretty sure not even half of America knows who he is. Well, I think I've already hinted at what's been a hindrance to Barber's fame, at least in the long game, which is misguided expectations. I mean, if there's any one word anyone uses to describe much of Barber's work, especially his Symphony No. 1, it's lush. It's not incorrect, but it's not exactly an ideal word for it either. Lush has me expect the music will sound pretty and sound something akin to the opening of Viva Pinata. But Barber's first symphony, which is done in a single movement, is no Viva Pinata. Symphony No. 1 is all over the place, and for that reason people call it what they do, but you're not getting something blissful. It's sick, it's evil, twisted,
Angry.
The Sibelian-described theme here always cracks me up. It's loud, proud, but ends on a chord more defeated than I'd say satisfied, like someone about to make a brave speech and then forgetting the words. And eventually it's that melody's final diminishment that's your first hint, first clue really, that this won't be ending very well. This entire symphony is a sincere lament of change and transformation. It's kind of like The Woods, hence this footage. It can be enrapturing, even euphoric, just as much as it can be haunting and oppressive. Watch an episode of Twin Peaks if you don't believe me, or take it from those Blair Witch kids.
I don't have the map, okay?
Heather, that is so not cool, man.
I know it's not cool.
That is so not cool.
I know it's not cool.
Even its prettiest moments have a duality of serenity and sickness. Take the part of the flute in the symphony's scherzo section, which flutters up and down in an airy manner. A bassoon and other various winds give their answers to the flute's part. The whole thing just feels so by itself in that moment, and the other winds feel creepily malicious, as if biding their time for this quiet and surreal extroversion to be cut down. One then might think this is a rather cynical work. Well, is the sky blue? There's a reason this symphony is only one movement, because that's all this story has to tell, baby. Don't call me baby. Sorry, it's just one punishing but beautifully observant and sensitive line of thought, acting as a threnody for whatever it is that feels lost by its end. You may not feel this way upon first listen. I don't think there's any way you could. Like all great works, it needs repeat visits. And you might ask yourself, why? Maybe I'll understand it, but does that mean I'll enjoy it? I mean, really? And the answer is yes. But I think you'll be able to relate to it more than you may initially think. I mean, just imagine something pretty or sweet and building that up and then just making it seem so vulnerable and you just want to care for it and cuddle it and protect you and put it in your Bucket, I love you. I love you so much.
I love my little naughty Pat. You're naughty. And then I take my naughty Pat and I go. Oh!
But what's just so evil and beautiful about it is that even with all the foreshadowing Barber gives you in this piece, there still feels like some kind of hope to latch onto until he pulls out the rug from under you. The final section begins with a vulnerable melody first sounded by the oboe. The winds allow it to unfold, and when its song is finished, the rest of the orchestra comes gradually falling down upon it. Every theme from all three sections returns in its final moments. The Sibelian theme from earlier, now oppressive. The vulnerable oboe melody of the final section, nightmarishly riled and helpless. Even the melody from the scherzo section makes a reprise by way of the trumpet, which just sits there mocking you. It's sitting there laughing at you. It's just laughing at you. The finishing touch is a coda that vanquishes every previous thought uttered. Barber happily offers no closure. Nothin'. Not even an idea that if we think about it some, we can build a better future? Wrong! I suppose it leaves you a newfound freedom to think and feel however you wish. For myself, I take the totality of Symphony No. 1 to mean that one can only try. That even the most beautiful, gentle, or unthreatening of things don't always get the sign-off they deserve or hope for. Some endings are brutal, possibly unwritable or forever damaging, and leave you with no reassurance or pat on the back. You can do your best to step in and try and prevent that utterly silenced collapse this symphony leads to, but it's not always going to do something. Kind of a complete, total buzzkill there. Oh, sorry. But there is something to be said, and rather inspiring, about the level of anger this work thrives on. You want fury, most people will go to Beethoven, but Barber gave it an appropriate tenderness and delivered it in a fashion you don't hear often. The second symphony isn't talked of as much, and it's a trickier work to get one's head around than the one before, which was already pretty intense. Symphony No. 2 is a much more structurally complex work in that it doesn't agitatedly unfurl the way Symphony No. 1 did. Its beginning is an abrasive one, and its themes are more concerned with how they grow in terms of texture. In other words, with how they appear instead of how they change. Think of it as being more concerned with the colors of a painting than the image itself. The image is still important, and its growth, but other stuff is taking center stage. So let's pretend you're one of those hokey Improve Your Life seminars, and imagine that at this moment, someone steps in and says you, yes you, need context in order to appreciate the work. You don't. Everyone will say you do, but they're wrong. What makes Barber a great composer, and by extension others, is that he gives you all the context you need. The inspiration for this piece is aviation during World War II. There you go. And as you could imagine, it's another piece that someone could easily sum up as angry. But of course we all know that if one word made grade, there wouldn't be any point in hearing it. The clever thing about Symphony No. 2 is its duality of cinematic and authentic. There's an undeniable sense of exhilaration within the first movement. Surprising considering Barber's sober pedigree. This is the same guy who did an overture for a comedy, and it still sounds less lighthearted than most. It's not as though the theatrical elements act as some sort of guise or facade over its anxieties, but that they go eerily hand in hand. A passage in the first movement features playful cor anglais, unraveling strings and dodgy brass that would feel right at home in any action movie fight, and it's followed by a brief polyphony of brass and timpani that exchanges its splendor in favor of a petrified fumbling of notes. The movement itself ends with a grandiose fanfare for its main theme, at first pompous and heroic, then rough and coarse, sounding more like a motif for Godzilla. Its second combative theme returns after a growl from the brass. It's a whisper now, with clarinet, oboe, and soft flutes and piccolos carrying off its usually loud and swift melody with a peculiar touch of whimsy and trepidation. I think you get where I'm going with this. It pulls you in one direction, then another.
Hey, Matt, how can we get back on the right track?
I said earlier when talking of his first symphony that there were moments of serenity and sickness, that at times they're separate and other times they're there all at once. You never get the sense that the different moods are fleeting, but more that they're unable to be held on to. There's a difference between those two meanings, and the result in this second symphony represents a harsh but undeniable likeness between tonal and atonal. Barber has been criticized for his more experimental ventures in dissonance and tonality, but he never leans too heavily in either direction, that of romantic tradition or the avant-garde. One of several problems I have with the field of atonal music is through its pure existence insisting that order, patterns, the constructive material upon which music is built are a facade, and ambiguity is reality. But this obviously isn't true, as pure disorder makes no sense without order. You could argue then that traditional music as we know it wouldn't make sense either because it doesn't account for disorder. But before I get too abstract, I'll sum it up like this. Heavily organized music risks leaving no room for interpretation. Less organized music leaves no room for foundation. But combining the two on some level can weave an oral story of almost any kind. And finally we come full circle, as Barber understood this game better than almost anyone. It's not just neo-romanticism. They're spiritual, emotional, and narrative puzzles, and that's how we as humans experience life. We initiate the hypothesis and brace for the variable. And on the fun side of things, it adds a sense of mystery. The intentions behind either symphony remain undefined. Symphony number 1 through its brilliant foreshadowing and a lack of closure. Symphony number 2 with its indeterminacy and wishful thinking. They're masterpieces. It's this weird, loving mix of showiness and the experimental that makes Barber stand out from the American composer crowd, and making him into what seems like an inevitable influence on everyone who followed after him, even if you never do seem to hear his name all that much. From the wild uneasiness of Leonard Bernstein's film music and later works, to even the Americana meets electronics of Mason Bates. I say if you have time then to stop by your local library and pick this one up. Library got torn down. Then it tripped the Borders. You mean Barnes and Nobles? Yeah, sure, them too. They close, son. Starbucks now. Then visit your local Starbucks and pick this one up. I don't know. I give it a bunch of stars. Am I even scoring these anymore? I don't know. Maybe that's where Lush originates from. So much is thrown at you all at once in both works that's the word they settled with. But mixed with that lush, never-shy romanticism is the occasional undertow, like a ball and chain, keeping you ironically grounded in its surreal fanaticism. Are you being sympathized? Manipulated? Both? Who can say? I encourage you to take a listen yourself and get lost in the dark abyss of that controlling, ceaseless, musical rabbit hole. Okay, bye!